Most tax pros leave a message.
It's Jane. I'm moving on to a TurboTax expert who beat your price. Adam Devine, tell him how I feel.
Hey, tax pro, she's been thinking twice. Best believe TurboTax will beat your price. This is a tax break.
Switch to a TurboTax Live expert and we'll beat what you paid your pro last tax season. Make the switch at TurboTax.com/beatyourprice. TurboTax full service only. Sign up by 12/20/2024 and file by 4/1/2025. Full details at TurboTax.com/beatyourprice.
ABC Wednesday.
Y'all complain all day. We want books. We want paper towels in the classroom. Bet you want raises too.
I'm still waiting on the paper towels.
Abbott Elementary returns with the new season.
We asked the district for more after-school programs. They gave us $50 for class pets instead.
Critics cheer. Abbott Elementary continues to be one of the funniest and most beloved shows on TV.
What y'all doing out there?
Taking bribes.
Proud of y'all.
Abbott Elementary. Season premiere Wednesday, 9:30, 8:30 Central on ABC and stream on Hulu.
Hello, and welcome back to 3D Printing Basics. This is episode number 31, and in this episode, I'm going to be acknowledging a mistake I made regarding Creality, and more specifically, their Ender 3. But before we get into that, there's two things that I wanted to mention. First being, if you listen to this show on Apple Podcasts, I am going to start listing or offering a subscription service where you can support me for just $2 a month. You can get access to episodes without ads and just uninterrupted. So I think that's really cool, a really cool option for my listeners. So if you would like to support me, it's only $2 per month. And if not, no worries at all. I just thought I would bring that up. Second, I would just like to say that I really appreciate all the support I've been receiving. I've been getting lots of messages, some emails, and lots of good reviews, and it just means the world to me that even when I'm having a hard time posting consistently, my audience is still there to back me up and support me. And specifically, I would like to give a shout out to Nigel from South Africa. He sent me a very, very nice email. It was filled with kind words and just one of my favorite messages that I've ever received. So Nigel, thank you so much from South Africa. I hope you're doing good, and I really, really appreciate you reaching out to me. And I appreciate everybody that reaches out to me and everybody that supports me in any way, shape, or form. It really means the world to me that there are people who really are dedicated to listening to this podcast and love this podcast, love listening to it as much as I love making it. So thank you so much for that. And without further ado, let's get into this episode. All right, so for this episode, like I said, I wanted to acknowledge a mistake I made. A few episodes ago, I'm not too sure which one it was, but I talked specifically about the Creality Ender 3 and Creality as a company. And for anybody that's been listening to my podcast for a while, you know that I am not a big fan of Creality. Rather, I would say more accurately, I hate Creality. I'm pretty sure that every time I've spoken about Creality on this podcast, it has been in a negative light. But specifically on that one, I got a lot of feedback basically saying, hey, check out their newest model, the Creality Ender 3 V3, because they believe that it's a lot different and it could make me change my opinion on Creality. And so, being the good podcast host that I am, I listened to my audience and I went and checked it out. And the results were astonishing and enough to make me feel like I needed to make an episode calling myself out, saying that I was wrong and that my opinion of Creality was undeserving. So let's get into the Creality Ender 3 V3. So the Ender 3 is one of the staples of 3D printing. It's arguably the first machine that kind of brought 3D printing into the mainstream. Their Ender 3 version 1, the first Ender 3 that they came out with, was one of the first, I would say, really affordable printers. It was always around $200, and that really incentivized a lot of people who were thinking about getting into 3D printing but didn't want to spend a ton of money actually getting a nice 3D printer. Well, not nice, getting an expensive 3D printer. This opened the door for a lot of hobbyists to kind of get their foot in the door, and was just a really good option for a long, long time. I think for about 5 years, it was definitely up there, and if not the best-selling printer during that time. And it was easy to put together. It was easy to use. It was very, very basic. It was a bed slinger, of course, not a Core XY, which isn't a huge deal for beginners. And overall, it was just a good printer. But the reason that I didn't like it, and I didn't like Creality in general, was because as times changed and companies like Bamboo Labs and their fast Core XY and print speeds, as soon as that started taking over the game, to me, Creality didn't really adapt like they needed to. They just kind of kept going with the same Creality Ender 3. They did come out with Core XY versions like the K1 and the K1 Max. And they did try to adapt later, but to me, they just never seemed to want to change their core product and just kind of felt comfortable with just peddling the same thing over and over and not really changing too much about it. And the problem with that was, as Bamboo Labs rose in popularity and as these Core XY printers got more popular and more popular, the price really started to come down on them, especially to the point where Bamboo's own bed slingers and their Core XYs were pretty comparable to price in an Ender 3. And as print speeds mattered more and as everything got faster, I would say that kind of the last saving grace for these Ender 3s was their price point. They were still really cheap. They were under $200. I'm looking at them right now. It says they're about $150. I'm sure if you got one used, you could sell it for $100. I know I did that. I got rid of my old Ender 3. I sold it for $100. And so that was kind of their last saving grace. And as prices on everything started to come down and started to become really comparable to the Ender 3, they didn't really have a leg to stand on. There wasn't really an attractive thing about their product anymore. And so when I was making this podcast, I wanted to let my audience know that there were better options out there, because I would say that kind of the last thing that they had besides the price point was the name value. Everybody in the 3D printing space, and even if you weren't in the 3D printing space, chances are the most recognizable name that you could hear was the Ender 3. I think especially everybody in the 3D printing space knew what it was. And I wanted to make sure that people weren't just buying this machine because they knew what it was and they didn't know what other printers were out there. And I just wanted to make sure that people were knowing that there were better printers out there, in my opinion, for a very similar price point. But now, here I come across this Ender 3 V3, which I did get a lot of feedback specifically on, saying, hey, Tyler, I understand your thoughts, but I believe you're wrong about Creality, and check this printer out. And so I checked it out. And on Google, it has a 4.5 out of 5-star reviews, which is really impressive for an Ender 3 V3. And just looking at it overall, it's a better machine. It's got a complete touch screen, which you don't see on the version 1, the original version. It's got linear rods. It's got pretty much a completely new build style, which is much different than, I don't see any aluminum extrusion anywhere, which is the antithesis and the base of what the original Ender 3 was built on. It's got a non-PEI, but a spring steel magnetic bed sheet. And it just looks like a better printer. And from the reviews, I would assume that it is a better printer. And it is a high speed. To me, it seems very comparable to Bamboo Labs A1. And it says it boasts on their listing that it can do up to 600 millimeters per second. Print speed, which we know probably not true. It's probably close to about half that. But overall, this seems like a much better printer than what the Ender 3 version 1 is. And to me, like I said, it seems very comparable to an A1. And the reviews that I'm seeing online have very much supported it. And for a price point of $329, it's not that much more expensive than what you would find an Ender 3 V1 for. Now, granted, it is over double the price, $150, probably what you could find a V1 for, versus $329, what I'm seeing this Creality V3 for. But you got to look at what you're getting for it. In Ender 3 V1, you're getting aluminum extrusion, you're getting really, really slow print speeds, you're getting no bed leveling, manual bed leveling, and for this, you're getting faster print speeds, you're getting a spring steel sheet. This thing does have automatic bed leveling, it's got the touch screen, just overall, I feel like the $300 mark and the $250 to $300 mark is going to be kind of the standard for the cheapest of the cheap 3D printers that we have moving forward, just because the technology needed to make printers that are up to standard these days are more expensive. You're going to need automatic bed leveling, definitely linear rods, and it's more expensive to have these systems that can make 3D printers run as fast as what is the standard nowadays. But overall, I would say that the Ender 3 V3 is a very good printer and very comparable to a Bamboo Lab, which to me, Bamboo Lab has set the benchmark for just about everything nowadays, especially now that they've come out with their A1 and A1 Mini, which are bed slingers, but they're still print speeds comparable to the P1Ps and the P1Ss. So to me, they have now also set the benchmark on bed slingers as well. And I think the Ender 3 V3 is very comparable to that. As I'm seeing on Google with 25 reviews, it has a 4.4 out of 5 stars, whereas the Bamboo Lab A1 on Google has a 4.5 out of 5 stars with 27 reviews. So to me, these two printers are very, very comparable. And granted, I haven't had either one in my own shop, so I haven't been able to test either of them out. Not sponsored, but hey, Creality, Bamboo, if you want to send me one and you're listening, I would love one. But I just feel like I had to call myself out there because I felt, especially with the new revelations and the new products that Creality is coming up with, I felt like I wasn't giving them a fair shake. So if anybody's listening and they're still, if they love a Creality and they're still looking, I would highly suggest looking into their Ender 3 V3 because it is very comparable to what we have on the market today. And overall, it just seems like a really good printer. And that just goes to show that companies are evolving, products are evolving. Just because a company is not putting out good products in the 3D printing space doesn't mean they can change and they can start putting out good products. I think this is a classic thing. And that's not to say that Creality was putting out a bad product. Their Ender 3 carried them and was a staple and still is a staple. It's a classic in the 3D printing space. And it was a really, really good product for years and years and years. And so it makes me happy to see that they have finally gotten around to adapting with the times, and they've put out a product that is very competitive on today's market. So just something that I really like seeing. But I hope this is my sincere apology that I got it wrong, and everybody check out the Creality 3 Ender 3, the V3. All right, with that being said, that's all I have to say on this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.